But it's due in January, so it's kind of early in the summer, I guess. And it might, if it comes earlier, then it might come on bloody Christmas Day. Who knows?
It's always so different, when you hear pregnant women talking about how it's going, what's happening. Are there similarities? Are there things that actually apply?
That you can kind of relate?
Or
I don't know.
Like,
Tayla probably hears some stories.
I feel like it's just a vulnerable time for women, and every woman's so different. Some women say they feel their most content or their most happiest or their most beautiful during their haputanga or during their time of pregnancy, whereas for some other women they might say they feel so tired and energy depleted, and that they really look forward to the baby being here because they can't wait to feel more like themselves again. So I think everyone's so different, and every pregnancy is so different as well, that it kind of is luck of the draw. I think you really don't know what you're going to get, but I think everyone hopes for the same thing at the very end, which is a happy, healthy baby.
And you're so right. It's funny because before getting pregnant, I just assumed it was like you get pregnant, you have the baby, and it's either vaginal or vaginal or a C-section, and it's like you've got two pathways and it's pretty much the same journey for everyone, and it just is not. Like, I've been listening to these like birth story podcasts and all this stuff online, and I'm like, there's not any two that are the same.
Right.
It is wild how many different ways it can go. And
what about the one in the water?
Yeah. I went and saw that, and did you see that getting advertised? What was it, Pacific Mother or something? And it was about women. It was really about pushing so that women can reclaim their birthing activities and the way that they want to give birth. And it was really highlighting how well we do it. I didn't realise in New Zealand, I thought, because coming from a health background, I'm like, the health systems, this is recording, damn it. The health system's got all these flaws and all of that kind of stuff. And then watching that movie and seeing what's happening in like Tahiti and Hawaii and all the other Pacific nations, I just was I didn't realise how bad it was. I didn't realise that New Zealand was the gold standard at the moment. And I still feel like it's not good enough, So it was actually it was really interesting to learn that. But this was basically a movie, and this woman was going around, and she's a free diver, and she did all the water birth, and she made it look beautiful, but which definitely isn't the same for everyone. But it was pretty inspiring. Yeah.
The thing with the way that society is still very sexist, sometimes in the small things. Like, it's not even I won't blame doctors, but it's so structural. Like, it's been going on for so long that sometimes doctors don't even realize the mistakes that they're making. I talk to my sister quite often, and I'm 35, she's 37. We don't have kids, and we don't plan to. Like, we're just not worried, if it happens, if it doesn't happen, whatever. But she was telling me how she went to a doctor to see one thing, like, and then suddenly he's like, "Oh, are you considering, that you're getting old, right? And are you considering having a baby?" And she was like, "Dude, like, focus on on what you're doing, like, if I ask you, like." And again, I understand, as a professional, where he's coming from, like, worrying about the body of the woman and kind of like wanting to know. But her reaction, made me think of maybe how those topics are brought to the table can be quite sensitive.
Absolutely. It can be a really vulnerable thing to have conversations with people. And I think that's why it's really important to clarify their position before you start trying to have that conversation, because our words hold a lot of power. And if we don't know what someone's perspective is, or what they're hoping their future to look like, and we're making assumptions, it can lead us down a bit of a tricky path. So I think definitely finding out what is that person wanting their future to look like, and then have the way you have those conversations is so important, because the reality is, say it was around pregnancy looks so different for everybody. Conceiving a child is so different for everybody, and it can be really vulnerable for some women. Having a family, starting a family, for some people who are very fortunate, that can be very easy, but for many others it's not so straightforward, and that can take a real toll. But if you have the added pressure of somebody else saying, your biological clock is ticking, your age, all these other things, that only adds to the worry and the stress if that is something that somebody wants for themselves, if they want to have a family. So I think definitely as a health professional, just being really mindful that our words do hold a lot of power, and we've got to be very careful about how we approach situations and conversations, because we just don't know how that person is feeling, and could be very vulnerable for them.
Off we go. Tayla, can I ask you to come just a little bit closer, or to bring the microphone closer to you? Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah. I don't know. I avoid doctors at all costs. Just even like the annual checkup. I'm like, oh, do I have to do it? Do I have to do it?
So many people are like that.
So many people are like that. Why is that, Tayla? Is it what?
I think people have different reasons for why that might be their experience, or why they might feel that way. For a multitude of reasons. For some people, it might be that they never really grew up going to doctors, and we see that quite a lot in some of our more mature generation. That for them, they have their own coping mechanisms, or their own tools, or their own remedies, and for some of them, it's that philosophy of, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a pain. There's other people that need this service more than me. And that's something I hear a lot. And, that's so thoughtful of them to think of other people. But everybody should be able to access healthcare if they choose. And I think when you're young, a lot of young people are very fortunate in the fact that they are generally quite healthy. But it's also that whole thing of wanting to maintain that. And so by having regular checkups, it's just a way to ensure that you stay healthy and well. But I can also understand for some that they may have had a previous experience that has influenced the way they feel about accessing healthcare. So, it's really is a catch-22, but I think it's about finding the service that's right for you. Finding people that you can really trust, and your health is such a personal thing, and if you're going in to see somebody about your health, a lot of people want to know that that's kept in confidence, and of course we are bound by confidentiality, but particularly when you live in a small community such as ours, sometimes just walking in the door and sitting in the waiting room, you might see someone or someone might see you walking in the building, and they think, oh, there's so-and-so going off to the doctors, I wonder what they're off there for, those kind of things. True. So all those little things can play into it. Yeah.
I think when I remember, and I come from a medical family, my dad's a doctor, my sister's a doctor, so I know their GPs, I know how general practice works, primary healthcare works, and I still, not now because I like my doctor, but I would always get really nervous going to see the GP, and that would be enough to put me off. And I don't know why. I would sit there and, they'd take your blood pressure and your heart and measure your heart rate and things, and it would be like pounding, and I'd be sweating. And they're
usually it's not like that,
what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just nervous. Like I don't even, and so that kind of awkward nerve would be enough to just be like, oh, I'm not going to go unless you really, really have to. But then you develop a relationship with someone you like, and that I think makes all the difference, having a doctor that you really connect with.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the environments within medical facilities can be a little bit foreign for people, particularly if they're quite medical. I think that's why it's really nice to walk into facilities where they provide a less kind of sterile feeling. Because when you go in, you're already feeling like potentially you don't have that same sense of control. You're often walking into a space that is kind of foreign for people. And you feel like that power is being taken away a little bit. You don't necessarily completely control what happens in a consult room. Of course, everything's done with consent, but you may find out something that you weren't expecting to hear, or touch on a conversation that you didn't think you were going to have that day. So that can be the vulnerable part for people. And we can just put people's blood pressure up, just by walking into a room, or saying, hey, look, we're going to check your blood pressure. Gosh, my blood pressure probably goes up too, and my heart rate, That's enough to make anyone feel uncomfortable. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Does cultural background play a role in that? Because I believe different people will have different approaches to what it is to look after yourself. I really want to touch on Maori ways of healing and everything, but like just as a broad question first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good place to start is that health looks different for everybody. So the way that I define health might be very different to the way that you both define health. And I think being able to understand how each person defines health and what they think they need in order to be their best and their most healthiest is always a really good place to start. But then when we talk about the cultural aspect, or even if we look at it from a holistic point of view, some people will see health from a very biomedical position where it's very much about the absence of disease or any any health conditions, whereas for some people it might be more about ensuring that their spirituality those needs are being met. It just looks different for everybody, and for some people it'll be all of those. And I think particularly for me, coming from a Maori background, I'm sure many people have heard of Te Whare Tapawha, and that considers all areas of well-being. And I guess particularly in New Zealand, we often work from a framework where we don't just look at disease processes or a biomedical perspective. We look at all the things that influence health and well-being. And so that's everything from, spiritual health, mental health, physical health, the whole range of things. Because you can be physically really healthy, but there's other areas that might need some love and attention, and unless we address those things, that person has the potential to become unwell if they are not having those needs met. Yeah.
Have you got something there, Renee?
Just
something on that?
Just absorbing it all.
Soaking in. Yeah, me too. But I have a bunch of questions. And I'm like, where do I start?
I just wish I could explain things so well like that. It's like, wow.
Thanks so much, Tayla.
That's just so beautiful.
So cool that we met, and you were a little bit skeptical, but it's still keen, and I appreciate that on people, because I believe that we all got something to offer. And especially for someone who's been studying and putting all your love and time and effort into it, it's cool that you were like, no, I'm going to do it. I think you suffered more to write the bio than actually to come and sit here.
Writing the bio was so, I'm telling you, ChatGPT, Google.
ChatGPT did my one. I was like, wow, I sound amazing.
Lifesaver.
I tell you what, I put up a little post on my Instagram, and one of my friends, she does a lot of writing. She's like, girl, I got you. Send it my way. I'll write it. I was like, man, I've got some cool mates.
Yeah.
Good. Well, if there you go. Another thing that I was thinking before, if we're going to talk about technology, Google Doctor. Isn't it? There's even a thing, right, between doctors, among doctors. They checked Google Doctors before. I guess. I don't know. But it is a thing, right? Like.
Okay, so. Isn't it? So definitely there are reliable sources of information, reliable websites that can be very useful. But I always say to patients, Google is like a bit of a black hole because you just don't know where you're going to end up. Sometimes you can type in, symptoms, and it might be something as minor as like, I don't know, a sore foot. that could come back telling you that you need that leg amputated. That could come back telling you you've got sepsis and, you know, you need to get to hospital now. So I say to patients, there are some really great websites that you can utilise, but it's always, you'll always see on those websites some of the red flags.
Yeah.
And if you have or are experiencing any of those red flags, then they'll always say to go and get a medical review, to follow up with your general practitioner, things like that. We have some amazing resources in New Zealand, you know, different hotlines you can call, things like that, that are also really helpful. So you can actually do like a phone assessment over the phone with a nurse, and then she'll triage you and then give you advice. Or they even have, some places even have virtual GPs now that you can tap into. So I think there is a reason kind of why people go away to study study these things, and you know, they put a lot of hard work into it, and it's because they want to make sure that people are getting care and treatment and support that they need, and that it's appropriate and correct. I'm not going to lie, we've all done a Google.
Yeah.
We've all done it before.
And does it happen that doctors also do that quick research while with a patient? It could happen, right?
So sometimes what will happen is, because health is forever changing, and that's the thing that I personally love about health, is that nothing ever stays the same. Research constantly changes, science constantly changes. So sometimes what you might see is that they get online to look up, might be recent research that's come out, new forms of treatment. Treatment's a big one, because, you know, we're so fortunate that we live in a day and an age where we've got access to so much equipment. There's constantly new research coming out. And so sometimes it's about them trying to see, is there anything new that I need to be aware of? Is there any new treatments, any new diagnostic tools that might be really useful for this patient? That's particularly important with medications too, because medications are constantly changing. And one thing we hear quite regularly is that, and I totally understand this, is that patients often want to be on the least amount of medication possible. So we're very fortunate that sometimes we can have one medication that might treat two things. And so if that patient's eligible for that, they might get online onto a approved website that is very reliable and check that, you know, that medication is appropriate, or is there any new medications that are out. So yeah, definitely does happen, but it's not just Google, it's, you know, reliable websites.
Reliable websites. Nowadays, man, it's hard. Yeah. I do it all the time, you know, like red spot. What is a red spot?
Images, Google images.
Oh no, and then you're comparing.
So it happens because you don't see your doctor regularly enough.
There you go.
Just go get your annual check.
But then I go to the doctor, he looks at the screen and no, I'm joking. Tayla, for me, one thing that puts me off is the lack of focus on natural medicines. You would call it homeopathy?
Yeah.
Is that because it was a revelation in my life when I was younger, and then I realized that sometimes, you know, like your grandmother will say, you just have to drink that tea, you know, and then you're like, what is she talking about? And then you drink the tea and then it works.
Yeah.
And then I found out that drugs, they are extract from plants, you know, like just young and not aware of things. Of course, where do they come from? You know, so it makes sense that nature is already providing a lot. So how is the situation in Aotearoa at the moment with access to I know that there's a big talk with Maori medicine. So can you tell me a little bit of the landscape?
Of course. So much like yourself, for many Maori, we call it rongoa. So rongoa is similar in a sense, I guess, to what would be called homeopathy. And for Maori, you know, using our resources was a massive part of us being able to achieve and maintain health and well-being. And so that whole concept kind of aligns with our creation stories. So part of our creation stories is Ranginui, the sky father, and Papatūānuku, the earth mother. And so for us, rongoa fits beautifully within that. So I think for a lot of Māori, when we look back in our history, rongoa was a very normal part of life for us. We didn't have access to all these amazing treatments and, different options that we do now. And for us, it was much more natural to turn to our natural environment. But we also had the privilege of growing up learning about that and knowing about that. Whereas in today's environment, not everybody has that upbringing or has been exposed to that way of life. We do have, rongoa practitioners that are available out there. And for me personally, I guess when I'm working with whānau and with patients, you might hear me say whānau a few times tonight. I don't refer typically to patients as patients, they're my whānau. So when we work with whānau, it's about finding out what is important to them and what do they see their health journey looking like, and what are the things that are really core and central to that. So for a lot of people, it is about trying to look at natural alternatives over anything medical. So it's about finding practitioners that can work within that too, particularly because, for some people, coming to the doctor is a challenge, but then coming to the doctor and being told, here's your script, and you need all of these, and if that doesn't align with your personal values and beliefs, the chances are that person isn't going to go away and fill that script. So you better just sit there and have a conversation about what is important to you, and okay, these are the things that we might have identified, what is your beliefs around that, and how do we work within those to try and provide care to you in a way that's meaningful, in a way that aligns with what's important to you. Sometimes it is about, people going away and trying natural remedies, trying the things that they want to try first. And sometimes they might come back and say, look, I need further support around this. I might need to start looking at homeopathy or at a rongoa practitioner, because all the tips and tricks that Nan and Koro gave me aren't quite doing the trick this time. I don't know if I'm mixing up my batches correctly. I've had so many whānau come back and they're like, man, my kaupapa cream's not cutting the mustard. I'm like, oh. She's like, I don't know if I picked the right leaves. It was my first time making it. And I love that. I love that people are trying to better their health in a way that feels right for them. But sometimes you will have people come back and say, I tried all the things and for me it hasn't worked, and maybe I might be willing to consider other options. So yeah, I think it's just about meeting people halfway and having a discussion and being really upfront about what is important to them and working within that.
Love that.
You just got to find the right GP.
You just got to find the right GP. Yes. I want to touch on that. We got some people watching us. Kia ora whānau. Didn't think I was going to make it. I'm in Auckland picking up my son returning from Europe and Japan. Wow. Oh, cool, Pan.
Awesome.
Glad you made it. Say hi to your son. That's awesome. You got some beautiful women on tonight's show. Yes, we do. What crosses the lips?
Is that Jillian?
Okay, cool. This is Pan Badass.
Oh.
Can you ask her what her view is on what crosses her lips now that she wears a moko? For men, your body is a temple for at least 2 years before you receive one. That's the first question. And then we're going to go for can she see marijuana becoming more of a rongoa in the future? So let's touch on the moko. Are you comfortable to talk about the moko?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Of course.
Shout out, Pan.
So I guess I think the question was around. Sorry, can you just repeat it? Because I want to make sure that I get this right.
I can. Can you ask her what her view is on what crosses her lips now that she wears a moko? I don't know if it was like a metaphor. Ben, if you're still there with us, can you what crosses her lips now that she wears a moko? For men, your body is a temple for at least 2 years before you receive one. would it be like how you see it?
I think there's a couple of things with moko, or moko kanohi. So for women that have
Yes.
a facial tattoo, we call it a moko kauai. For men, we call it a mataora. So I guess there's this understanding that for a lot of people, they have this preconceived idea of that there's like a checklist that you have to meet this certain criteria of you have to be matatau in te reo Māori, you have to be fluent, you have to be able to karanga, you have to be a saint, you have to, have been on your marae and put in the hard yards and all these things, this massive criteria. And I've got to be really honest, when I grew up, I thought that was the criteria. One thing I've come to learn is that is not the views of my tupuna or of my ancestors. So actually for us, moko kauai or mataora is a rite of birth. If you have toto Māori or Māori blood, that is your birthright. That is the only requirement. And it doesn't matter if you can speak te reo, it doesn't matter if you're fluent in te reo, it doesn't matter if you grew up on your marae, none of that is required for you to receive your moko kanohi. And I think it's changing some of those views. And I think one of the things that I've realised as I went through my own moko journey and have brought my moko to the surface, because we do believe that everybody wears their moko inside. And so when we go to our moko papa, that process is just bringing out what already exists, bringing that to the surface. So for me, that was a whole journey to get to the point where I felt like I was ready to receive my moko. And what I think I'm seeing now is that it's becoming a lot more common. I see a lot more people today wearing moko, and I think some of those preconceived ideas or some of that understanding is starting to change. And I know for me growing up, I think that was a generational thing, particularly coming from a whānau where their reo was beaten out of them. And then there were generations where te reo wasn't a gift that they had grown up with. And many of them have had to work to reclaim their reo. Some of us are still working to reclaim our reo. Some of us are further along in that journey. Some of us are still near the beginning. And that's okay. I think languages, no matter what language you're speaking or you're learning, is a journey. I don't think anyone's ever, an expert. So, yeah, I think part of that is, men can have their own perspective of moko, but I think moko kauai is a gift to wahine. That is, that's my mana wahine. That's my strength as a woman. And that's where I draw my strength from every day. And it's a reminder to me of who and what I'm accountable to. And I think that's really important, especially working in a health space. That is quite a tauiwi space, or it is, kind of dominated by a different worldview to what I've grown up in. This helps me to remember my why within that space, because it's really easy to get caught up in another way of thinking, and you forget why you're here. So for me, that's what it is for me. In terms of the passing the lips, I'm a little bit uncertain about that part. But if they want to message in, please do, because I'm happy to.
There you go.
Happy to respond.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. No worries.
Okay. So for the people who maybe haven't checked the description of the show, you currently work for Te Korowai.
Yeah.
Which is a Maori health system. Yeah. Not exclusively.
Nope.
But how would you say, based or focused on the principles of Maori health?
Yep.
Does that mean that because of who you are, who you are, does that make it as your choice and it's hard to say for life, but like, does it still open possibilities? Like, would you still consider going to different ways of health that is not exclusively for Maori based? How does that work?
I guess the first thing is te koroai Hauora or Hauraki is a Maori health organisation, but we're for everyone in Hauraki. So you'll see as part of our branding, it says mō tātou o Hauraki, and that means for everyone of Hauraki. So it's not that we're just exclusively for Māori, we are for everyone. But the values that our organisation are based on a Māori worldview. So a lot of that is about, whanaungatanga, kotahitanga and manaakitanga. So it's about, togetherness, all these beautiful values that we treasure in Te Ao Māori that we live by. So that's not just a tagline or a beautiful mural up on our wall. It's something that is very core and central to the way that we deliver our service. And so that's kind of the organisation that I'm working in. Previously to working at Te Koroai, I didn't actually work for a Māori health provider. I worked in private general practice. And so I've worked in another area that is very different to the organisation I'm in now. And, I think in every experience you have in life, there's always positives and negatives within everything. But what it has done, being able to work in both, is given me an appreciation for our health system, the things that we do well, and maybe areas that we need to continue to work towards and grow a bit more. So I've had the benefit of seeing both sides of the coin, I guess. Yeah.
Did you have your moko kawai when you were working in the previous job?
No, I didn't. So I've only had my moko kawai for the last, I want to say 3 years maybe. Yeah, so, but for me, this journey was a really long journey. It wasn't something that just one day I woke up and I thought, oh, today's the day, whānau, we're going to go up to the marae and get our moko kawai. I actually grew up, my peers were probably looking at superheroes in books, but for me, I grew up looking at wahine mai moko, and for me, it was like, wow, she's so beautiful. Man, she's just standing there and all of her strength as a woman, and she's so proud of who she is. So proud that she can wear that on her face every single day and tell the world, I'm a wahine Māori. And I thought, yeah, she's pretty choice. And so for me, that's where that, like way back then, I kind of was thinking that way. But I think growing up in a whānau where moko wasn't common. In fact, no one had a moko kawai in my family for 4 generations. And there's so many reasons around that, but I think that also delayed my process in receiving my moko because, for some of our whānau, they did still have those preconceived ideas of having to meet the checklist and, you had to tick all these things off before you could even consider being worthy of one. And that's a big thing, worthy. I think that's a word that I hear thrown around a lot. And I feel real aroha for people that's the way they've grown up, or that's the understanding that they've had, because for so many people that I talk to, they think, wow, that's so beautiful and I'd love that one day, but I don't think I deserve it. And that's so sad. I think that's why we don't see, for a big period, that's why we didn't see so many people with them, because they didn't think that they were worthy of having their kawai. So, that's kind of where it started for me way back then. And I think being in working in a place where that is a normal part of life. And for Māori, we see moko as very healing. To undergo moko papa or to receive moko is a form of healing. So how you talk about rongoa or homeopathy. For us, moko is very much a part of healing. So for me, getting my moko kawai was also part of healing a part of not just myself but my whānau as well, because obviously there was these generations where we didn't grow up with our reo. And the one thing I wanted was that I didn't want my nephews growing up seeing this as different. And I knew that one day when I choose to have my own family, I want this to be normal for my tamariki. I want them to think that that's a part of everyday life. But if the people around them don't have their moko, how are they ever going to grow up with that understanding or that way of thinking? And I grew up that way, so I know that, you know, I didn't feel worthy and I didn't think that that was normal at all. So those were parts of my why, really.
All right, we're off to the marae.
Off we go.
That's beautiful.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh,
That's cool. Off to the marijuana world. Here we go. So upsetting because even in the educational system, which I'm part of, so, and I understand that you gotta know what you're talking about. But I feel like when you cannot even talk about something, that's a problem, because that's how I grew up. You know, like I didn't get information enough, and then you demonize everything, and then you see everything as a big threat, or the opposite, which might be even worse. It's no big deal, whatever, you know, and you're challenged to do stuff. But like when it comes to something so powerful, so healing, so beautiful as marijuana, I didn't watch the thing with Chris Hipkins and Luxon, but I saw this very short clip. There was a question, you know, like, should marijuana be like, they gave a no, but like, I won't say which one, pretty obvious, but like for one of them, who am I to say, but like, it really felt like he wanted to say yes. You know, when you believe in something, but because you're attached to a party, you're attached to a belief system, like you just kind of like, you don't want to lose those votes of people. And honestly, I feel like that's why so many things in the world we're so behind, so many of them, because it's just that fear of talking about something. And for doctors, I believe that you have the confidentiality thing that like you hear all these stories, you know, and then it must be frustrated at some stages of like, come on, you know, like so many people, because we talk to friends, we talk to people, and we see communities, we know what drugs are doing and what they could be doing, right? So there you go. That's my vomiting. Now throw into the professional. What's the take like? Is there any future? Because is there any use of marijuana at the moment in New Zealand that is legal?
So there is things like CBD oil that can be prescribed. And I guess that's the part that we're in, is about if marijuana is going to be legalized, how do we ensure that it's produced in a way, and I'm not saying that that these are my personal views or anything like that, but how is it produced in a way that people can ensure it's they can distribute it, or that it can be sold or scripted or whatever in a way that is considered safe. And I'm not saying that I don't believe that, you know, marijuana isn't safe. I'm not saying that I believe it is. I'm just saying that is. Oh God, I feel like I've got
You're doing well. Keep going.
Doing well. So good so far.
I feel like that it's that whole thing, because obviously in New Zealand, in terms of medication, we have a big authority called Whānau, which essentially regulates what we can have in the country and what we can't. And, you know, all of that's based on science and things like that. And then there's the flip side of how do we make sure that if we're going to legalise it and we're going to prescribe it, that we are doing it in a way that's safe for people to receive, where we're not potentially going to put them in any harm's way. So I guess that's the very PC way of answering that question.
Cool.
I thought you were allowed to grow it for personal, like for yourself or something. Isn't there a little?
I don't know.
Isn't?
I
mean,
Taylor's gonna Google that thing.
Yeah. Let me go to my reliable website.
Or maybe it was that maybe it was that
Google
that was
doctor.
something that was getting pushed towards. I don't know. I thought that like you were allowed to grow your own little plant for your own personal consumption for certain ailments. I thought, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't have a plant out the back, don't worry.
So did you say pharmac? So I guess it's something that is updated all the time. Like there are new drugs, there are new things coming up. Do you know anything on the psychedelic side of things, the research? And because I know that like you don't have to answer those questions, but like it's just because I saw it recently that Australia is actually moving forward with it.
Yeah, so that's actually really an interesting question because there are psychedelics that are currently being prescribed in certain with certain medical presentations over in Australia, particularly around some particular mental health conditions. And there is criteria that people have to fall within to be eligible to be prescribed psychedelics. And from my understanding, I think that has to be done through a specialist. So that is definitely happening in other parts of the world and just over the ditch. I'm not sure in terms of New Zealand where we sit within that, but often what happens when whānau are looking at approving different forms of treatment is they look at trends overseas and so they'll sit back and look and see, okay, since that's been introduced, how is that affecting the populations there? What has kind of eventuated out of that? Is it considered safe? So they look at research from all around the world and then they start to consider whether that is appropriate for us here in New Zealand. So I say watch this space. You never know. I think that's the thing about medicine. You kind of have this idea that, oh God, that'll never happen. And then we start to see things happen overseas and it kind of starts to become a little bit more normalised from when we first were introduced to the idea or the concept. And it doesn't take long for that to kind of spread and for other countries to become more open to, different ideas and different forms of treatment and things like that. So, I'd be really interested to see where things end up.
And perhaps it increases as well the evidence base.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just waiting for more and more research, which is always a good thing, I guess.
Let them jump first if the water's
Make
cold.
Australia the guinea pigs. See what happens to that lot first.
How cold is the water? Warm water. It works. Great. Love it. Okay, I have to touch in the elephant in the room. I love all the talk and how I've always had good experiences with doctors in New Zealand, I must say. And I'm not saying just because you're here. It's because I actually don't go that often. But I'm from Brazil. I've been here for 10 years. It really surprised me how slow it is to book an appointment. And I know that I understand now that it's procedure, but things like, if you don't hear from us, it's all good. And I'm like, what do you mean? You're not going to talk to me?
It's so horrible when that happens.
Like, what? Yeah. Am I that sensitive? Or like, so some things, it's just hard for me to understand that a developed country. Sorry, Renee. Come to Brazil and you see, man, what I'm talking about.
When you go get a blood test or something for something and you're waiting days, is this like, you're looking harder, or is this the like?
Is the silence good?
Is this the like? Like I'm sweet now. It's so funny that you say that.
It's true. Like again, just being honest. Like, why does it take so long? And are we struggling? Like because I'm asking this in a way that I want the best for the professionals because I guess there's nothing worse than being in a position that people are complaining and you're like, we're doing the best we can, but like there's more things involved, so I prefer listening from you.
So currently our health system is under enormous pressure. Unfortunately, there is significant staffing shortages right across the health system in every sector. Some of them are even more pronounced. The part that makes it really difficult is I think anyone that gets into health, when you ask people, why did you become a nurse, or the most typical answer would be because I want to help people. And so you come into I guess this career or into this industry because you want to make a difference in people's lives. What makes it really challenging, I guess, is when sometimes the system may not be reflective of what you want to achieve. So it's not, I'm not saying that necessarily the health system is completely broken, but there are definitely areas that we need to fix. And currently, because we don't have the staffing levels to meet the demand or meet the need of all the people that, you know, require care, what that means is that care has to be reprioritized. And that's so unfortunate, you know. That just doesn't sit well with me personally. I understand why that is, but I think what makes it really hard is when people are trying to be proactive. They're trying to go and see their doctor because they are healthy and well and they want to stay that way. Or, you know, they may have some concerns that potentially something's going on for them and they want to get onto it now before it potentially unfolds to something bigger. But when you can't secure that appointment, that can be really concerning. And sometimes that makes you feel even more worried because you think, gosh, can I afford to wait that long? I don't know. Like, how serious is this? What is this? And, you know, that flows over not just from, you know, not just from general practice, but also into specialist care where the waiting list can be massive, months, year, longer. And so that means that people are having to sit in the unknown sometimes for a really long time. And sometimes that can mean that they're unfortunately, you know, living in pain or discomfort and all these different things. And that's not the health system any of us want to work in, and that's not the health system anyone wants to receive care from. But I think because we have such massive shortages, that affects what we can realistically deliver. So things like blood tests is quite common for general practices to say, look, we'll contact you if any further follow-up is required. And 9 times out of 10, that's simply because they do not have the workforce to contact every single patient that they run a lab for. Because we do run a lot of labs, to be fair. It's it's a massive part of massive diagnostic tool. But not having the manpower to actually be able to contact every single patient. But I also understand on the flip side what that's like for patients, because you do, when you have blood tests, you just want to know, like, oh, you know, is that okay? Or is there something I need to be aware of? Or, you know, and until you get that text or that phone call or that email, or you can see it on Manage My Health or whatever platform it is that you use, you still have that in the back of your mind for a lot of people. But yeah, I think all of these things, and coupled by the fact that, you know, we've come out of the big C, which was a real stretch for people. I don't think our health system has actually recovered from that. So I've been in health now for the last 7 or 8 years, and seeing the toll that's taken on people in general, but particularly on those that work in health is massive. And, you know, you hear all these different things about, you know, people, care fatigue is real, where, you know, you're providing care, but you're really tired yourself and you just feel like sometimes you're pouring from an empty cup. And it's that whole catch-22 of, oh, my patients deserve the very best of me, but I don't have the very best of me to give right now, and but our health system is so stretched. I feel I can't possibly take leave. You know, that I'd feel guilty. And what about? Does that mean my patients won't get seen? And what does that mean for my colleagues? You know, it's this kind of like vicious cycle for people. And so there's so much to it, but not having enough boots on the floor is one of the key reasons.
Yep.
Would you agree?
100%. What she said. Yeah, 100%. Just resourcing and you're so right. COVID put an absolute spanner in the works. I work in aged care now, and that was like going back into a war zone after after all the lockdowns and things and access to healthcare. And it almost, it seems like that, everything's just gone a bit backwards. It's a tricky one.
Renee, what you do is it's quite specialized, right? The speech?
Yep, speech therapy, yeah.
Speech therapy. How is the communication with nurses, with GPs, and what do you think about the way that it's handled from someone looking for that big picture?
The communication, but like within a team or something?
With the team and what you hear from your patients as well?
I mean, for me, it depends. Like when I was working in the public health system, there was much more communication because you worked as part of an MDT or an IDT, a multidisciplinary team, and you had your dietitians and your nurses and your doctors and everything kind of around you. So the communication was a bit better, whereas now I work privately and you're completely siloed and separated, and the communication there is so difficult. You're just spending a lot of time trying to get in contact with the doctor or the nurse or the family or the dietitian. You know, there's not that cohesive glue that the team usually creates.
Yeah.
It's much, much harder. So you feel like your fights are even more difficult when you're in the private sector. But that's why it's so important to be relying on your relationships with other organisations and other healthcare providers, your doctors, your GPs, your nurses, and just try and like keep that together. Yeah. Good.
And when it comes to preventive work, because I feel like that's another big one to touch on. If you want to alleviate the issues, if you want less waiting lists, and you want less people well, then we might as well look into prevention, which is a good segue to social discrepancies as well, because some people will understand prevention better than others.
Exactly, totally. I think ideally that's the direction that I think our health system is aiming to move in, that, you know, a lot is managed out in general practice and primary health care to try and prevent people getting to the point where they require admission to a tertiary setting, so going into hospital to receive care. But I think the things that influence that are multifaceted. So it is great to be able to say, okay, everyone go to your GP. Well, we've just touched on workforce shortages, but then we've got all the other things to consider as well, like can people realistically access primary health care? So we're talking things like, do they have a doctor's facility within their community and the place they live, or are they going to have to travel miles to be able to even see a doctor? Are they in a position where they can actually afford that? And that's a massive thing for people. I have seen that, I guess, working within two different areas of, you know, private general practice and then a Māori health organisation, and seeing the difference between populations that frequent both services is quite massive. And unfortunately, there just is some people where that just isn't even possible. For them, it's just a struggle to, you know, put a roof over their head, food on their table, keep their house warm, you know, keep their children fed, all these things where they're just trying to survive, that doing those other things, having the luxury, and it shouldn't be a luxury, that's the thing, but of being able to go and see a doctor is just not even possible. So I think it's about looking at the social determinants of health, to be honest. Those are the things that impact people's ability to access healthcare. You know, education, employment, socioeconomic positioning, health literacy is a massive one, whether people have the skills to be able to navigate a health system. Not everybody is, you know, has been brought up or has been taught how to call and book an appointment, you know, those kind of things. It's we are asking a lot of people when we want them to come and see us, and we're just assuming that people have the ability to do that, and that's not a reality for everybody. So I think we as a society need to change the way that we deliver our services. And so one of the things I really love is that they've recently, in the last few years, brought out school nurses, which I think is amazing, because already we're teaching our children about health and well-being. What is that? What does that look like? But we're also delivering a service in a school where it's not going to cost that child to go and access care. So if the whānau are not in a position to get their child to a doctor's surgery, they can be seen at school. And of course we don't, ideally we don't want our babies going to school if they're sick, but they can go and see somebody if they need to, So there are all these little things that are being implemented, and, Maori and Pacifica providers that are not just delivering services within a clinic. They're doing outreach, they're going to marae, because some of it is about where we're delivering them. It's not, we're expecting them to come to us. Well, actually, sometimes it's about us going to them. We're probably more likely to see the people that aren't as able to come and see us if we go to their doorstep, if we go down the road from where they're living. And that's a whole community. That's not just one whānau, that's everybody. So there are all these little things that we're trying to do in terms of a society, but we just haven't nailed it yet.
We have a good question from the audience. Chloe Potai.
Kia ora, Chloe.
We're all big fans, Chloe. What options on improvements in the mental health system does Tayla have, if any, especially from Whare Tapawha? Whare Tapawha? Is that correct? Whare Tapawha view.
That's a great question, Chloe. I love that one.
Thanks, Chloe.
So I think that part of that is about, actually, and this is where it goes back to school, I think we need to be having these conversations really early.
What is Whare Tapawha?
Te whare tapawha?
Yes,
so
please.
that's what we talked about, the holistic model of care.
Right. Yes.
Where we look at all the things that influence health and well-being. And so I think, I actually used to be a school nurse. And so at a whare kura, so at a, at a school that is, they speak te reo. We speak te reo.
Cool.
And so one of the biggest things was that I felt was important was teaching our tamariki about health and well-being. And what does health and well-being look like? Not just to me, like in general, what it might look like to different people. And when do we identify that maybe we're not as healthy as what we want to be, or we're not in a position of what you personally would consider healthy. And I think it's having those conversations really early on and normalizing it and helping them understand what do you feel like when you are at your best, and what are the things that start to crop up when you start to think, oh, I'm not feeling my absolute best. Actually, today I'm feeling a little bit average. Because I think being able to raise tamariki that are really in tune with who they are and how they feel and what they're thinking already sets them up for success. But when we're not having those conversations early, I wonder if we create a barrier in itself around talking about it, because for some of us, coming from different cultural backgrounds, it is almost taboo to talk about mental health and mental wellness, and when you're not feeling your absolute best. So normalizing those conversations, I feel, is really, really important. And then looking at what are the things that we do to maintain our wellness, and how do we prioritize those? Because I'm sure we've all been there, right, where we think, man, I'm feeling a bit strung out. Oh, I can feel like inside I'm starting to boil a bit, but you think, oh, I'll be right, and you just carry on. And then all of a sudden you have that one day where something so minor just tips you over the edge and you feel like your world is ending. How do we identify that way earlier on, and how do we normalize it and actually put strategies in place to start addressing some of those things so we don't end up at that point. And I think some of that needs to start right back at school, in the home, you know, daycares, koanga, all those kind of things. And not to say it doesn't, but, you know, just ensuring that we embed that into our education system. And then when people do come to the doctors, how do we make sure that we are sending the same messaging? How do we make sure that we are supporting them in such a way? Because I think early intervention is everything. If we get in and support someone super early, we wouldn't be seeing our babies going through, you know, psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health services. And the saddest part is that many of those wait lists are so long. It's not uncommon to have 100 people on a wait list that are not going to be seen for a really long time. Or, and this breaks my heart, that it requires them to get to a point where things are so dire that now they're at the top of the list. We never want anyone to be at the top of the list. Actually, if we'd put the mahi in way back here, maybe they would never have got there. That should always be the goal. But the way our system is at the moment.
I see a problem there, though, because if you are going for the base, where it's like, which is education, the tricky thing for me there is that still we are operating in an educational system that focus so much on that competition element of a nasty system that wants you to succeed more than him, more than her. You know, like not exposed like that. But there's this thing of, we just work towards that, of like, what are you gonna be? You know, like how are you gonna make it? Like what's the thing? And I feel like a lot of the pressure, it's even there, so it becomes a catch-22, because obviously there are amazing, incredible people, so supportive there for you. But as you said, it's a shame that they have to be there. Because if the system was all good and everybody was looking forward to just learning and being and not having to worry about things, you wouldn't need those professionals there. So I see the passion and I see the value of it. But for me, it always gets me that it's such a structural thing, isn't it? It's so big that you got to do the best you can for your part. And hoping that the other people who are in charge of their part are also supporting with this. Otherwise, there's no balance, eh?
And do we, by, you know, feeding into that, are we perpetuating poor mental health? Because is that what we're teaching our children? That it's all about competitiveness? Because actually the only one they should be competing against is themselves, not anyone else in their classroom. And it makes me really sad to think that our tamariki think that way. Because, you know, like you said, everybody has something different and something so special to bring to the table. But our own kids not seeing that within themselves because they're worried about their mate and beating their mate, that they're now blinded to all the amazing qualities that they have, that makes me really sad. And I think that if that is what our system is delivering, and you know, it's not necessarily known, this could be subconsciously, right, or just the way that it is, our structures, we need to change our structures. That's just the bottom line. And I think that's not anything we don't all know, right? There are some things that we do beautifully, without a doubt, but there are definitely areas that we need to improve and we need to change, and we need to change them in such a way that it meets the needs of everybody. And you know, we can sit here and have a conversation about equity, but I think we all know about equity. And my personal opinion is just that if we deliver any kind of service, and I'm not just talking about health, but if we're delivering it at a level that is aimed at most people but not all people, then some people are going to flourish. That's wonderful. What about the people that are not at that level? If we deliver services from the ground up, we expect you to come here and you don't necessarily have to have anything, and that is totally fine. We are starting from scratch. Then there is no preconceived ideas or, oh, you must have this in order to do that, in order to access and this, and in order to get this kind of care, or whatever it is. If we start from the ground up, there is no excuse. Everybody benefits because we're starting at the very bottom. Everybody above that is going to thrive. Currently, is that what we're doing? Does everyone benefit? Because I know just from looking at health, if that was the case, well, we wouldn't even be sitting here having a conversation about equity, but that would be reflective in our health statistics. We wouldn't have certain populations sitting in all the worst health statistics across the board. So I think I've just answered my own question.
Oh, and the demographics show, right? Like it's quite clear to see.
Yeah.
Like you go to poor neighborhoods, you go to places where the access to very cheap average food,
Yeah.
it's super high, and it's I was impressed because I don't watch TV, but our show is growing now. Our social medias are booming, everything is happening, and I'm like, oh damn, I gotta catch up with the world because I'm gonna bring these people that will talk about hot things. I gotta watch the news.
Watch the debate.
Anyway, watch the debate. Like for me, but I'm there. Anyway, so I'm watching TV every now and then what? It's horrible. Like the commercials, like I thought it was better because now it's on demand, which means I'm in control. No, you're not. No. Like it's McDonald's, KFC, McDonald's, V.
Yeah.
You like VA? No, anyway, and the prices of those foods, I just couldn't believe. I'm like, what? $5 for a meal, a big meal or so? So, and then I remember when I was living in Mount Eden, painting houses in some neighborhoods, and we were driving for a while, and I could see like one across the other. I just wanted an apple. Honestly, I was like, because I brought my food, and then I was like, can I get some fruit? Like, where do we go? And one of the bros drove me to get an apple, and I felt sorry. Like my English was at that point that it was hard to say, nah, man, don't worry. Like, so he drove me. Like, so that's something that translates as well in health, right?
Absolutely translates in health. Just talking about that, like, access to food and we have this thing where we talk about access to goods and services. So health falls within that. But when we look at the social determinants and the things that influence health, that is a massive one. Socioeconomic position is huge, because if you come from a socioeconomic position that affords you the privilege to access goods and services that are going to help you to achieve and maintain your health and well-being, fact of the matter is you're more likely to be healthy. If you can access doctors, surgeries, specialists, private specialists, food, access to exercise, whatever that looks like, all those things, you have more of a chance of being healthy. And I know that people say that, healthy food is cheap. Well, I don't know. Just in West Auckland, for example, there is one massive stretch of road. You drive up there and that place is full of every takeaways you can think of. And I just think, man, the convenience of that. Now, we also have to think about parents, right? Back in the days, it was quite common to have a parent that was at home that would, be at home to raise the babies, run the household. In my grandparents' era, that was normal. It was normal for one of them to be at home, my grandmother, and, cooking and things like that, particularly while my parents were working. And so that meant that convenience thing wasn't as much of an issue because there was someone that was able to do that. In this day and age, that's just not even possible. Pretty much most people have to work. And in families, a lot of people don't have the privilege of one parent staying at home and one parent working. Times are just too tough. So when that happens, that feeds into all of that, right? Convenience. Cost is massive. When you can go and get a $5 meal, it's probably not going to be the most nutritious meal. You know, it's probably going to be cheap cuts of meat, you know, all those kind of things, fried off, cooked off, quick, convenient, easy. But trying to maintain a diet that is, you know, they talk about the pyramid. Who the heck can afford to eat like the pyramid?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Egyptians.
like let's be honest. Has anyone seen the price of eggs?
Yeah.
Milk, all these things, you know, and that might just be for two of you. But then when you look at that across a family, it's just not achievable for a lot of people. If you were privileged enough to be in that position, then that is wonderful. And I'm not discounting those people, and I'm not saying that they haven't worked hard to get there. But how do we make that everyone's reality? It shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be nice to have. That is a necessity.
When you're talking about having back in the rā, when you know, you had that system where you'd have someone at home doing the cooking, and you know, you didn't have to have that convenience. I was just thinking, like in aged care as well, you see the same with the way that people are looked after, and so now you see these facilities being filled up with all of our older adults and all of our kaumātua and kuia, but where it's completely displaced from what it used to be. And even though people and families want so much to be able to look after their loved ones at home, they can't because of the way that we live now. Everyone has to go to work, everyone has to you know, make money to put food on the table, so being able to look after someone in those final years is so much more difficult. And so then you're faced with that problem that, you know, medicine's keeping people alive longer as well. So, you know, we've got this big aging population, and more people are going into these places that it can just be really dire, you know, and it just breaks people apart.
Yeah, that can be really challenging too from a cultural perspective.
From a cultural perspective, yeah.
You know, putting your loved ones in a home. I know, you know, for us, we really feel that those people raised us. You know, our kuia and our koro and our kaumātua raised us, and you know, made us into the people that we are today. And the least we can do is give that back in their time of need. And when you can't do that, and if you're raised with those same values, that can be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
And then you talk about, you know, that people are living longer and things, and then that also feeds into the workforce shortages because all the pressure on the health system, I should say. Yeah. So, you know, it's all kind of interlinked. You can see how all these connections start to happen.
Interlinked, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how deep both of you can go on that, but I have a take on because we were talking about the clip, Renee, that we did that we made from last time you were here, that you told this interesting story of children having pies and V's for breakfast, and that went crazy on social media. And a lot of the comments were like, people were not like hard on you, but like there was a common thing of saying,
I haven't seen any of these comments.
Nah, like and like we delete them, like, you know, if they're nasty and all the stuff. But like it was very common, like that justification, you know, kind of like, oh, but I work for it, or like, well, it's better eating this than not eating. You know, like how hard it is to have a decent breakfast. So at least we have something to give to our kids, whatever. Like, so we're not here to judge people. My question, I was just giving an example to put my question there. Because the thing is, that's a common thing to hear. Oh, but I can. Especially after the big C. There was always this thing with like, oh, my rights. And I hear that so often. Oh, I'm all up for freedom and rights. And I'm like, yeah, all good, but like we live as collective, you know, like your rights, your freedom interferes on other people's rights and freedoms. So are you thinking about the collective, or you're just thinking about your freedom and yourself and your rights? Because then maybe your freedom affects someone else's freedom. So getting into that realm, because I was listening on the radio about putting strict regulations on sugar, sugary drinks, and lollies and all that stuff. And one of the people were defending the fact that like it's a right, like it shouldn't exist because as an adult, you know, like maybe some sort of regulation for kids, but like as an adult, you should. And I understand, but my take is it's not fair because an industry who is profiting on us knows the addictive power of those things that they put into those foods. And then for them, it's easy to say, well, but we're just providing something for adults and they can choose if they want it or not. But when you talk to a doctor, they will tell you how hard it is to get someone out of an addiction or a professional. So what's the take of health professionals when it comes to those tricky regulations?
If I'm going to be really honest, so that comment around, and, you know, they're completely right in the sense that, you know, at least they're eating. Absolutely. Totally. That's a given. Would rather people eat than not eat. Absolutely. But it's that whole thing of lesser of two evils, right? It doesn't mean it makes it right. Or, you know, and I'm not saying that eating a pie is not right or having a sugary drink is not right. But what I'm saying is that if we make that the benchmark, you know, that feels like a bit of a black hole to me. The benchmark should be, how do we change our current society and our systems so that healthy food is accessible? So that, okay, the pie and the sugary drink might become a treat rather than an everyday stock standard, because that's the position, the socioeconomic position I'm in, and that's what's available to me. That's the option on the table. That's what I can afford. That shouldn't be the only option. If people want to have that, they should be able to have that, but they should also be able to access all the other things as well. When it gets to the regulations, that's really interesting, because when you look overseas, there are places that have introduced sugar tax. So if you look at places like the islands, they were having massive health issues over in some of the islands, and they've introduced sugar tax, particularly because we know that certain populations are more at risk of developing certain long-term health conditions, a primary one being things like diabetes. And that can also come with a raft of other health conditions, should that not be managed well. So part of the sugar tax was to try and reduce the incidence of those particular conditions in those populations, knowing that they're more at risk. And, you know, the thing is, here in New Zealand, we have the very same thing. So it's really a catch-22. There are going to be some people who are absolutely for it because they can see that, you know, potentially that might reduce the incidence, and then there's flow-on effects from that in terms of health dollar, you know, people's quality of life, how long they live, all these other things. And obviously there's a financial aspect to that. But then there's the other side, like you've said, around people having the right to choose. And it's a difficult one. Like any decision like this, it's really tricky. But where do we find a medium, a happy medium? Where is the middle ground where we, I don't want to say get the best of both worlds, but where we make it so that it's fair. And that sounds like a real fence sort of kind of response, hey? But that's ideal. That's what we want to achieve, right? We don't want anyone to feel like we're cutting them off or taking away anyone's choice or taking away anyone's right. But for the people that right now don't have a choice about buying a pie and a fizzy drink over buying, I don't know, a fruit salad and a beautiful ham salad sandwich, how do we change that? I reckon that's where we should invest our energy.
And that's what I think that yeah, I didn't realise that caused so much. Hey, in my head I'm like still trying to like backtrack what happened there, but it's exactly what you said, it's about giving the option. There's no judgment on someone making a decision to have a pie and a fizzy drink. Like, I have my fair share of pies. I feel like they're a great food. But it's about having the choice, like being able to have, okay, if there's a pie and a fizzy drink, it may be represented in a different price bracket to perhaps the fruit pot and a yogurt or a sandwich. If you're still going to choose that, you can't stop it. Like, that's fine. That's your choice. But at least have the choice. And people aren't getting the option. So, of course, you're just taking what's there. Yeah.
I feel like that was beautifully summarised. Why did I harp on so long?
No, that's exactly what you said.
Wow, we really could have cut to the chase there, team.
We're good. We're on the same team. Okay, no, let's just stick to a different direction.
Can you send that to everyone who said all those other things?
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna make if I offended anyone, I'm sorry.
No. We're gonna make a response video in high quality, and show them how
flowers
you
in the
make
background and make me look real nice or something. Like, I'm kind.
Okay, just to change the vibe a little bit. What are common things that people come to the doctor, to you, and it's just a shame because, like, you would expect that's not the right thing to say, but like sometimes things that you wish people were told and there would not be a reason to go to the doctor.
Great question. So some of the things, I think it's because people don't always know where to access certain services. And I'm so sorry for my colleagues out there, because I'm sorry if I seem, work your way and you're a little bit under pressure, but this is really helpful for our whānau that need to access care, because we all know now that there is difficulty getting appointments, particularly in primary health services. So things like injuries, if it's like, you've rolled your ankle, or you've done some kind of injury that you can get under ACC, but you don't know if you're going to need like some kind of physio and stuff, you can go to a physio that's ACC registered. They will fill out your ACC for you. They'll lodge your ACC claim. They'll do the physio. And for some of them, they'll order an X-ray if that's required. That is amazing, because sometimes it's quicker to get in there than it is to try and get into your own GP. So I hear that a lot. So just knowing what providers can provide what services. Sometimes it might be like, you've got some concerns, like you're about to run out of your medicines, and you think, oh, gosh, I've got that upcoming appointment, but I don't have enough to tie me over until then. Some of the pharmacies can do like short scripts, 3-day scripts to tie you over until you've got that appointment. There's all these different things that are out there available. I'm just going to put it out there now, whānau. Healthline. Yeah. They're awesome.
Yeah.
Healthline are fantastic. You can ring them, talk to a nurse, get a triage. They're going to, get all the information they need to then give you the clinical advice that you require about where do you need to go next. So they're an awesome place to go to. There's other services like 1737. So that's a really great mental health support line that people can call. You'll talk to a registered professional, and that's available 24/7. So you'll be able to talk to somebody if you're going through a stage where you things are just feeling really heavy, or you're feeling really overwhelmed and you're just not sure, is this a time where I need to maybe see someone? That's a great resource to use, to go there and have that chat and find out, okay, actually, is this, life changes and just the pressure of life, and is there something that I can do to help with this? Or is this time where I might need to go and seek support? 1737. Yep. So there's all these different support places that you can access. But here's the thing: if you don't know about them, you don't know about them. And I think in primary health, the thing is, how I explain it to people is, we know like this much about this much. We have to know a little bit about a lot, because anything can come through the door. And that's what I love about my job, because no day is ever the same. You get to see a raft of things, and that's what keeps it interesting. When you go to a specialist, they know this much about this much. So they have that real specialised kind of education behind them, and they probably know everything to do with the thing that you're going to see them about. But the tricky part for people is with the pressures around not being able to get an appointment is they don't know either. Can this wait? Can this not? So it's sometimes worthwhile actually just ringing your GP and saying, hey, these are my concerns. Does this warrant an appointment, or is there actually somewhere else that I might be able to go to access care, or, you know, is there another option? And 9 times out of 10, I'm more than happy to give you a call back and just give you that advice. So yeah, I'd really encourage people to do that. And Healthline are great. So there you go, whānau. Healthline is going to save you some pūtea because you don't have to pay.
Yeah.
It's all free.
Shout out. That's good to know.
It's true though, like it's just about like it's knowing what services there are that you can access and how to navigate it. I find that in my job and even in the private space, but particularly when I was working in a DHB, you were a care coordinator first. I was a speech therapist last. Like you would go, because I was working in the community, so you'd be going into homes and you'd just be spending the first few weeks of maybe your weekly sessions going in to just get the lay of the land and figure out where all the holes are and get them connected to all the services that they were eligible for, that they had no idea, so that they would stop slipping through cracks. Or and there's so many there's lots of holes, but there's also lots of ways, like bridges, that people don't know about. And so I guess Healthlines are probably a pretty good one. But we've been asking a lot of questions and referring a lot to just, when we go to the doctor or when we go to the GP, and we're talking about the doctor, but what is it that you and your particular team with the nursing side of stuff, like how does that differ from when you go see your GP, and what do you, does that make sense? What do you guys do versus
what kind
the
of
GP?
Care do we provide? So that's real tricky because there's a lot that we do. I think the key difference between a nurse and a doctor is that the doctors work and I'm not saying that they only work from a biomedical model, but that's their area of specialty is a biomedical model. So their primary role is diagnosis and treatment. In nursing, particularly New Zealand trained nurses, we are very holistic in the care that we provide. So often we sit beautifully side by side because the GP or might diagnose someone with something and they might want to start a treatment, and the nurses might come in behind that and support that around, okay, what does your social situation look like? Does that feel like that aligns with your personal values? Are you in a position where that form of treatment is accessible to you? How's this going to affect your family life? We look at all those other things that come with a diagnosis of something, and it doesn't have to be like a massive health condition. It might be, I broke my foot. Okay, so how's that going to impact on your work, and how's that going to affect income, and what does that mean for you in terms of being able to live at home, and all those other things. So I think that's where we sit beautifully side by side. For nurses, there are specific things that nurses will do a lot more of than what the GP will do, and we're really lucky. We also have nurse practitioners, and sometimes people don't really know what a nurse practitioner does. They sit like almost, I don't want to say in the middle, because they're amazing. We're really lucky to have nurse practitioners, so they can do a lot of the same things that a doctor will do in the sense of they can prescribe, they can diagnose, they can treat, they can refer people to specialists, so they can do a lot of the same things. But they work from a holistic point of view because they are a nurse first. So they have this ability to do both. Whereas nurses, they can't prescribe. Well, actually, some of them can if they become prescribers. But generally speaking, we don't prescribe typically. So that's kind of the difference between the roles. And we're so lucky in New Zealand that we've got, all these amazing health professionals. And that's just talking in terms of, the area that I work in, primary care, but we have nurse practitioners across the board, and we've got other amazing allied health professionals that enable us to do our job and that we work closely together with. sometimes could be better.
I've actually seen a huge shift in aged care recently as well, with a lot of the GPs, and I don't know what it is, why. Maybe it's like maybe there was a regulation change. I have no idea. But there's way more nurse practitioners now coming in and taking the lead, and there's a lot of places that I go into now that don't even have a GP.
Yeah,
they just have nurse practitioners. Yeah, and I don't know what made that shift. If it's like a funding thing, or if it's just a shift in like the culture now, or what it is, or there's just not enough GPs, or they're preferring a nurse. I don't know what it was, but there's definitely that shift happening, and it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I think the thing is there is a shortage of doctors.
Yeah.
Particularly in New Zealand, but even further than us. And so by having the privilege of being able to have nurse practitioners, they are really supporting the health system to be able to deliver amazing service. And I want to be as bold to say that I think there will become a time when nurse practitioners will be the normal, and that we may see less GPs, because they are so hard to source at the moment. And there's a massive training that they have to go through, and not saying that they're not needed or required. We're all needed and required, but in terms of nursing, you do your 3 years to get your degree, and then you can actually work and finish the rest of your study to become a nurse practitioner, and there's funding pathways available for that. So I think that will probably become more enticing to people over time that look at going into a health area where they're wanting to work in that kind of extended scope.
Well, you've just answered my question as to where all the GPs have gone in aged care, but it'll be the kind of the resourcing. So the nurse practitioners are coming in to try and sort of support that space, I guess. It's funny though, because you still get like there's two sides of that coin, right? You've got in one space you're like, wow, that's a really effective way to sort of support that space, but then you often get there's this perception that GPs are the only ones that can do anything. It's like they're the kind of the holy grail, and anyone else, like a nurse practitioner, might not know as much or something. And so like when I'm talking to a lot of my clients, they're kind of like, well, there's not even a GP in this place. And I'm like, oh no. But and there's that perception that because there's no GP, it's like it's gone to the dogs. And they're shortcutting everything. And, for a moment I was like, oh, maybe they are shortcutting. Like, what's going on here? But then when you think about it, you're like, no, actually, there's probably a reason. But, yeah, I don't know. There's kind of, that view where it's like, wow, that's a really good way to fill that gap. And then where's my doctor? Gone. Yeah.
I feel like we just touched the surface with this talk. So cool. We might have to bring you back, Tayla.
Oh God! And check your ear some more.
It's one of those topics, that you can go to so many different places, and I really appreciate you coming here, because people, I feel like there's this thing of even when you're skeptical or you fear something, like you want to know, you want to chat on your, like, quietly watching on your phone when no one is watching. Like, we are interested in health, like we just want to live a better life, so I feel like it's a great service what both of you are doing to our communities, and thank you so much for joining us.
I'm just in awe of how you describe things and speak to things. I'm just sitting there like, it takes a lot to make me shut up, And I've just been here going, oh, wow, that was so beautifully said.
Like it is important. I feel like all professions are, like all of us, we play a role, but we all know what happens in life when you need a health professional, like it's just, it takes to that next level and it affects the whole whānau. So it's great to have young, powerful wahine.
And we need more Maori health practitioners, guys.
Yes. So so here's a little plug.
Yeah, here's our plug.
So are there
speech therapist.
There you go. Are there paths or ways? Because that's another thing. I feel like one thing that would put me off, and a lot of maybe other people off, is the time that it takes to become a health professional and the money.
Yeah.
Come on. So are there alternatives or ways that not specifically Maori people, obviously more Maori, but like in general for people who might not be able to afford a university? Like how does that work?
Yeah, it's really difficult when it comes to alternatives outside of uni. And, you know, I say uni, but also like polytechs, wintechs, all those kind of things. Because essentially you have to have a degree to be able to, if you want to go into particular areas of health where you become a registered practitioner or registered health professional. But there are other roles within health, and this is what I often suggest to people, and this is how I started. I started as a kaiawhina, which would, some people would call it a medical centre assistant or a healthcare assistant. For us, kaiawhina is a little bit different. Our role differs quite a bit. But that's a great way to get a taste of health, because sometimes you just don't know. Like when I started, I knew that I wanted to do something that was meaningful and, impactful in the lives of others. I didn't know that was nursing. I thought that might have been police force. It is only because my mum is a nurse that I probably ended up down this pathway. You know, she was kind of at me like, think about nursing. And then one night she was so brave that she brought the enrollment forms home and pushed it across the coffee table, and she's like, there you go. So that's kind of how it started. But being able to get a taste of something, if you can do that, is a great way to figure out, actually, is this something that I could really be into? Or I'm glad I dodged a bullet and 3 years worth of
you mentioned a fund though. What is the fund?
So so that fund that I talked about earlier is once you have the degree, but there are obviously new schemes that have come out through the government where your first year of study is funded, things like that. There's lots of scholarships out there. You know, there are options, but totally get it. Totally understand that studying is incredibly expensive, and when surviving is expensive, trying to add study on that with, potentially less income.
Yeah. And not even just the cost of the course. Yeah. It's the cost of getting to a course, and most of them are in like major cities. A lot of people aren't living right next to the universities. It takes a lot to get there. We've got, in speech therapy, we've got 3 tertiary providers that provide the speech therapy programs, and we've got one at Massey that does a distance program now, and we almost had that shut down because of funding at the university, and that was the one program that was providing the most Maori tauira students because of the distance options. So we were able to capture people in their homes without having to move them to the big cities, so the thought of that getting shut down was horrific, and we had to fight really hard to keep it, and we've managed to keep it. But so it's not just the cost of the course; it's the cost of your travel, of moving away from your family potentially, and all of that. So it's everything that comes with it. So it's always good as well, even if you wanted to not to write too many, like the courses off. There might be distance options, there might be other ways, and just to get in touch. And if there's anyone that wants to do speech, this is a big plug, man. Any Māori, potential future Māori speech therapists, holla. I'll hook you up. Just come talk to me.
Cool. And have a look at the policies, right? Because now we're coming to elections time, and all the parties have the health policy. So good time to have a look and see who aligns with what you believe, right?
Totally. I think we all have a bit of a responsibility to vote. And, I'm not one of those people that go out preaching, vote, vote, vote. But I don't feel like I can then turn around and complain about the position that we're in if I'm not using my vote. So, and particularly for young people, I get it. There was a time where I don't vote. But now, every vote counts, and at least you can feel like you had your say. So this is a big support to you all to go and go and vote.
Thanks so much, Bays Pizzeria, for bringing some beautiful kai for us. How was that pizza?
Delicious. That was so good.
So good.
Thanks, Henry, my man, Bays Pizzeria. When you're coming to the Coromandel, make sure to check them out. And thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Both of you.
So good.
We'll bring you back, Tayla. No bios. for the next one, we already got it, the bio.
Yeah. Oh,
So easy.
yeah. Okay, I can cross that off. All right then.
I'll get the one. Ask ChatGPT to rewrite it.
Yeah.
make
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
and then we're ready. Thank you. Thanks, Renee.
You're welcome.
And we're live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Cool guests, cool people, cool shows. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We are on YouTube live every Tuesday and Thursday, and you can listen to the show on your favorite audio platform as soon as we finish. How cool. Ka kite. Peace.